Alright guys, so Scorched Earth is finally out, so you guys already know the drill. We're going to go ahead and go through the top most viable base locations for PvP. If you're a PvE player looking for scenic base locations, I'm going to go ahead and let you know right now, this is not the video for that. I'm sure somebody will have that video up for you guys, but this is going to be base locations that I think are good starter spots or main base locations for PvP, and this is going to be geared towards official PvP servers or close to official PvP unofficial servers. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get right into this video. Alright boys, so to start it off, we're going to start with one of the two new caves, which is the lava cave that is located inside of the Wyvern Trench. I will apologize, this is extremely laggy over here. The map itself is pretty rough on my PC, so hopefully the FPS gets better as time goes on, but the base location is about 5917, right here next to the land bridge over the Wyvern Trench. You're going to want to go towards the side heading out towards the desert, and you're going to see a little bit of an alcove down here that it goes into the entrance, and here you go. Now, once you head inside, like I said, the FPS is very rough. You see my character looks almost like a slideshow. I think that has to do with probably all of these effects that are going on here, but you see, like, it's definitely gotta be these effects. You come in here, you have a fairly decent little choke point here. I would assume this is probably around where you're gonna want to put your main wall, is around this corner. I don't think that you can fly inside of this cave, but I haven't actually tested it, so I would check that out before you go ahead and build your whole base in here. But the cool thing about this cave, as opposed to some of the other caves on SE, is there is actually water in the back. It's not water enough for you to like breed dinos and stuff, but you will actually have access to water for like your crops and things like that back here. So it is a pretty large cave. There is a lot of space for you to like get breed lines and stuff going, but I wouldn't exactly rank it near the top personally, because I don't think the entrance is all that strong. And I do think that being in the Wyvern Trench, you're going to attract a lot of attention. If you're, obviously, if you're a tribe that's taking over the entirety of a server, it won't really matter because you've got, bases all over the place. But for the, amount of space that you do get, it really doesn't seem like the absolute strongest cave on the map. I'd say it's probably about a mid-tier cave. But if you decide to take it, you will be secure in here at least for a little while before transfers open, because it's going to be extremely difficult for people to get down into the Wyvern Trench and raid you. Now, one more thing to note about the lava cave that is kind of a double-edged sword is the entire cave on the interior obviously is 6x, but so is everything on the outside. So as you can see here, this one C4 damaged everything in here about halfway and completely destroyed that one. If you head over to here, I've tested this in a few different spots, and pretty much everywhere in the Wyvern Trench, at least near this cave, is 6x. It destroys the foundations straight away. So it is going to be extremely difficult for you to get locked into this cave by attackers, but conversely, you also won't be able to set up a lot of like large-scale defenses outside the cave, because they'll be able to be dropped very easily with C4 and rocket runs. So keep that in mind when you're building this cave. You probably want to have some sort of like spam outside. Probably want to do a mix of tech and metal, so that way they can't just clear it very easily. But mostly you're just going to want to rely on your interior defenses and not try and put towers and turrets and stuff outside. The next spot that I want to talk about is actually more of a starter base location. You don't want to live here for the entirety of the time that you're going to be on Scorched before transfers open, but if you're looking for a spot to get a foothold and to have access to a lot of resources and stuff early game, as well as just being kind of hard to raid, this spot right here next to Green Obelisk, especially on unofficial where you're able to transfer, is going to be the spot that you're looking for. This spot, although I have dropped 2 Titanosaurs on it in the past, it is extremely resilient to most raid attempts that I've seen, and it does seem like they actually made it maybe even a little bit flatter than it was on ASE. Like I said though, there is, obviously the thing that you have to worry about of people dropping large dinosaurs like Titanosaurs or racers onto it with a giant ramp, but if you go ahead and you spam the bottom part down here thoroughly with a lot of spaced out foundations so that they have to use a lot of C4 to blow it up, you'll at least have a little bit of time to prepare yourself for that, as well as if you use triangle foundations on the side here, it could prevent them from getting a little too close up. And with the new way that all of the generators and stuff are, you can probably put turrets in a lot more creative spots over here to prevent people from ramping up in the first place. I honestly think that this is probably one of the most slept on spots on Scorched. A lot of people will generally just go for caves straight away, but this spot and the next spot, which is actually a group of spots that I'm going to go ahead and put all into the same spot, they are kind of really slept on. And moving right along into that next spot, we're just going to go ahead and talk about the pillars in general. So there's a lot of different pillars on Scorched that are worth building on. This one here is very decent. It's usually where you would see somebody put a fob that is not from this server, because it is nothing around it like will allow you to get any line of sight on it. Those stack of pillars, I believe on ASE over there in the distance, were actually a lot worse. But like I said, I feel like they've flattened out a lot of these spots here. If you were to build your base here and you got all three of these little pillars connected, completely spammed off and everything, you could in theory have somebody build up to you, but it's going to be so difficult for them to build high up enough for them to do anything that it's going to not really be worth their time, especially with, again, how you can set turrets on like the sides of walls and stuff now. So the fact that you can put turrets on walls like this will actually make it extremely difficult for them to push up, whereas before you would have to hang them down with hatch frames, and it would make it to where they could drop a lot of turrets at once. Now you can spread these all out, and especially if you have tech turrets, it's going to make ramping up to these pillars extremely difficult. We have this one here, this group of pillars on the opposite side of Greenob, which I've actually built a greenhouse up on these pillars before over on ASE, and it was extremely hard for people to raid it, and we kept it for the majority of the wipe. And then the last set of pillars, which I think would be the most viable if you're going to try and keep as like a permanent base location, would be this set of pillars here towards the center of the map. Now, they're not as high as the pillar over there or some of these other pillars, but I do think that you get a lot more space here than you do at the other ones. It seems extremely flattened out, and even these giant rocks here, which you might think would get in the way of your build, are actually destructible. So if I go ahead and blow these up a few times, there we go. So these giant rocks aren't really going to be a problem. You can get rid of all the small rocks, and you can get rid of the trees. And with the way that this has just a small lip up to there, and the new way that the building system works on ASA, I would not be surprised if you couldn't just have this all on the same snap point, which obviously you can, as I'm doing it right now. So you can have a pretty large base up here that, again, is going to be extremely difficult for people to pillar up on. Alright, and now moving on to a cave that you guys should know from ASE. This is probably the weakest of the original 3 caves that people would build in over on Scorched Earth. Look in here, we're sitting at about 27.5, 28.6 on the map, and this is Blue Ob Cave. Now, honestly, I never really liked Blue Ob Cave on ASE, and I don't like it at all on this game, but it does have the one benefit of having water in the back that you can actually use, which is a lot less impactful now since the Lava Cave also has water in the back. So if I had to pick between the two, I'd say that Lava Cave is probably the better one. They've done a good job with visually overhauling it, but more or less it kind of feels the same. If anything, they made this entrance here bigger. I'm not exactly sure, because a lot of the times that I've been in this cave, it's been on servers that have had a modified version of it where the entrance is not so bad for the defenders. But this cave seems pretty similar on the inside. It doesn't really seem like they changed too much, and if you go towards the back, there's a pretty large chamber that you can build in. Again, it's really framey on here, so I do apologize for that, guys, but you make your way towards the back here, and this is normally where I would end up getting, you know, like somebody's crafting area and stuff like that if I was raiding this. And then towards the back here is usually where the main loot is. Now, it's not the worst cave in the world by any means, but personally, I do think there are better caves on Scorched Earth. If you have no other option, it is better than building outside, in my opinion, but it is not the strongest cave on the map, so keep that in mind. All the way in the back here is where your artifact's going to be, which for some reason has no texture for me, so that's kind of cool. Just wildcard things, right? And you could have your main loot room back here, and then have like a small bit of turrets, and then maybe like a full wall here, keeping this choke point and try and defend it. Personally, I think that the new caves with, the ability to put turrets up on the walls and the ceilings probably are a little more defendable, and especially on Scorched Earth, having no stego spawns, at least on ASE, it could have stego spawns on here. I haven't checked just yet. It could be a little bit stronger, but it's definitely up there on the list. It's just not the strongest cave. Now let's go on the other end and take a look at what I believe to be probably the strongest cave on the map, aside from maybe the new cave, the Oasis one that we haven't checked out yet. Before we move on from this cave, I want to go ahead and point out actually that the outside of this cave is not actually 6x until you get fairly close to it. So we'll go ahead and show you guys visually here where that 6x actually starts by going ahead and testing it ourselves, because I'm pretty sure it's fairly far back. So this is 6x as well, and then it looks like right around here is probably where the 6x ends. Yeah, so this one right here is the first one. So you have a little bit of area outside that you could put a turret tower at. It's not the flattest area to work with, but you could take, like, for example, this spot here and completely level it out and put a turret tower there or something. Now, on the flip side of that, it does mean that if you do lose the outside of this cave, you will actually be able to get locked in fairly easily, because pushing the outside when it's all 1x is going to be difficult. So do keep that in mind as well when you're going to pick a base location. A spot like this versus the outside of the lava cave is going to be a lot harder to push if they get full control and turrets and generators and stuff outside. Alright, and moving on to what I consider to be the best base location, at least in ASE and from what I've seen on ASA on Scorched Earth, we're going to take a look at Central Cave next. Now, Central Cave is a spot that I've actually built in quite a few times, and I've actually raided online and offline before, so I do know a little bit of what I'm talking about here. It does look as though the entrance is roughly the same size and that stegos won't be able to fit in through here. I haven't actually tested, but based on my character size, I'm going to go ahead and assume that's the case. Again, stegos didn't spawn on Scorched on ASE, so I'm assuming that they don't on ASA as well. And if I remember correctly, this should all be 6x out front, but it could be different, so let's go ahead and check that as well. Yeah, it looks like 6x. And let's keep going all the way back to the edge here and make sure that this is also 6x, because I remember that this was part of the problem, was people didn't like to build here because of all of the 6x out front. Now, that's not really a big issue in my opinion. I think that as long as you have a turret tower right around here is usually where we would put it, and you build a giant like teleporter turret tower and all that. This area here is not 6x, and it'll allow you to have a place to come at the attackers. Now remember, a lot of times people are going to want to fob as close to the entrance as possible, so more times than not that I've seen a fob, people will tend to set it up in this little alcove here. Now the cool thing about this is that it's kind of a weak spot to set up a spot to fob, because one, it's all 6x, two, you have 1, 2, 3 separate entrances that you can come at this from, and it doesn't really hold if you start to apply real pressure to it. As long as you can have equal numbers to push a fob that's in here, you should have no problem taking it out. Now as far as the interior goes, Central Cave seems more or less the same as it was on ASE, with the one major difference being that you actually don't need any sort of cliff platform shenanigans to be able to build in here anymore. You can build on the ground normally, and I believe you can actually even build on the walls with triangle foundations, which is something that you couldn't do before. So that's going to make this cave a lot stronger in my opinion. You're going to be able to have a lot more spam everywhere all over the walls to keep people from pushing in. Now it is again a double-edged sword, because if somebody was pushing into this cave and they were trying to get foundation control, a cliff platform takes a much larger cleared area of spam to be able to place, and then they'd have to go through the process of getting the foundations off the cliff platform onto the ground and then moving them down. But I do think that the benefit of being able to replace your own spam and place stuff like triangle foundations all over the walls along with your turrets and stuff is going to make that a lot stronger. It does actually look pretty much identical to ASE. So you come down this little path here. Most of this is just going to be sacrificial spam and maybe a few turrets to slow them down on their way in and let you have time to figure out what's going on. And your first major defenses usually end up being in this room here. What I normally see people do is they'll have the entire area spammed off. They'll have some form of a wall here, maybe some form of a wall back here, but this stuff normally gets dropped fairly quickly. And then the meat and potatoes of your defense is going to be in the choke point that leads into the actual central part of the cave. This does actually look slightly larger, which does concern me a little bit, only at the front end here. However, when you get closer in, it does look like it gets really, really tight again, so I doubt you could even get something like a trike through here. Hopefully that's the case. Stegos definitely won't fit through there, but with uncryoing stuff, it's going to be the same old song and dance of holding this spot here for as long as you can and trying to have that war of attrition with the attackers. Inside looks pretty much identical to what it was on ASE, so you put your wall back here, you know, go ahead and foundation all the way back. People normally use cliff platforms, but you don't really have to do that anymore because, you know, one, you don't need to be able to place foundations, and two, the way that foundations snap is a lot easier, and you can create many floors within here and have a really good setup for breeding, and this could be your main base for months or even years if you're able to hold it long enough. Personally, this is, if I was going to build on Scorch, where I would go for. I've had a lot of good wipes here, and I've had a lot of good defenses, as well as had some good raids on this cave, so I know what works and I know what doesn't. Fortunately, if you're building here, a lot of what works for getting into this cave isn't in the game yet, namely Deinonychus and Snow Owls and Desmodus. Those are like the big powerhouses for raiding these. Now, obviously, you're going to have some players who are more used to raiding before all of those metas, and they may, you know, be able to get in here a little bit easier, but I personally never had to deal with that, so I can't really help you guys out there. And yeah, so that's going to be Central Cave. Let's move on to another base location that I feel like people just really don't talk about very often, and that is going to be this peak over here next to Red Obelisk. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, having an outside base in 2024, what kind of meme is this? But if you played Island, then you would know that actually the outside bases that were just basically the flat parts of tops of mountains were actually some of the hardest to raid and strongest base locations that there has been in Ark in a while, and I think that's due to a couple different things. One, the lack of cryopods at the beginning was a huge thing. Two, the amount of people getting meshed out of caves. And three, the improvements with the way that building has been done. So you're able to get a lot better angles with turrets and stuff. Also, you don't have to worry about cave damage. Now, the only downside to building something like this would be the fact that the electrical storms would turn your generators off. But that is something that you're going to have to deal with if you're not in a cave, no matter what. And people built on 1010 and stuff like that and lasted forever, so just make sure that you get to bosses as quickly as possible, get a little bit element, and get a tech generator going, and you should be good. Now, another big advantage to living outside in a location like this is you're going to have access to a lot of the resources. Now, personally, I've never done any like primary farming on Scorch, so I'm not 100% sure where all the best places to farm are, but mountains tend to have a lot of metal on them, a lot of obsidian, a lot of stone, things like that. So you do have access to a lot of those here. I'm already seeing a handful of metal nodes here, you know, just flying around. And I would assume that it's probably not the worst place in the world to build. So it's just like, you know, a little something that if all the other caves and stuff are taken and you guys really want to get set up, I would assume that this is probably one of the, you know, better spots to go. You just need to make sure that you secure the only way up, which is this little path right here that loops around this bend here. So you'd want to make sure that you keep this locked down so that people can't just walk up to your base for free, and once you do that, you should be good to go, especially if you can rush to tech turrets from one of those starter locations like a pillar or that little like anvil spot over there next to Greenob, and then you get this spot set up. The only real soaker on this map, aside from racers, is going to be rock golems, and those things get absolutely melted by tech turrets. So having a base outside wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in that situation. You just have to make sure that you are ready to defend if an electrical storm comes and turns your tech turrets off. But yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the church cave next. And then last, I think we're going to take a look at the new cave, which I haven't even looked at yet. So hopefully it is not absolutely bananas, but I have a feeling from what I've heard that it might be. Alright guys, and if you can believe it, this is actually Church Cave. It does look pretty different from the outside, but it is still fairly similar on the inside. I'm not sure how much I like the exterior, having all these ruins and stuff pushed so close to the entrance. I haven't checked the 6x yet, so let's go ahead and do that and see what we're working with here. Hopefully they haven't screwed over the ability to put a tower out here. Oh, man. Okay, so Church Cave has become exponentially worse then. Yeah. Having no ability to place a tower out front of Church Cave is really, really rough, because typically if somebody loses the outside of Church Cave and the tribe that's raiding them knows what they're doing, they're just gonna make it in. So let's see how close we can actually get, and then we'll see if maybe you can have a tower at least covering it, and that way attackers would have to deal with it before they full fob. It looks like right here is where it stops. So, I mean, I guess you could have a tower here. With all these ruins and stuff, though, I really feel like you could cheese it pretty easily. I don't know if I would want to invest any of my resources in that. Maybe you can have one offset to the side a little bit now, and at least have one, like, right over here or something. Because if that was the case, I guess you could at least... Oh, no. Yeah, that's pretty rough. So, outside of church, I'm going to go ahead and say probably not the strongest. Definitely probably got hit the hardest by the nerfs. Interior, at least this area is a little bit more open, so you could maybe have some turrets and stuff in here. I really don't think that it would last very long at all. But you could do that. Now, this area in here, I'm not sure how I feel about this just yet. It is a lot bigger, which means that you have a lot more space to put turrets and stuff down. But also at the same time, it does make it a lot easier to just get in here and just soak if you have a cryopod. And since they added cryopods in before extinction, that is something that you're going to need to be like cognizant of. When building the defenses for this, you need to build in a way that prevents the enemies from uncryoing. And with this little spot right here, you could easily have somebody sniping at you, so you need to make sure there's some sort of turrets facing these little holes, so that way you can defend properly. I don't know. I mean, you don't have Deinonychus to be able to run in, and you don't have Shadow Mains or anything like that can increase the movement speed. So I guess maybe it'd be okay. Although the amount of caves that we ran just on foot with focal chili and beer and stuff like that on the island makes me pretty worried for this first room. Fortunately, the main choke point past that initial room still does seem to be here. Unfortunately, unless I'm mistaken, this really looks like a stego could fit through here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to spawn a stego just to check for this one in particular, because it really, really looks like a stego could fit. I don't know. Yeah, okay, so it looks like a stego still won't fit through here, so that's good at least, but you still do need to make sure that you set your turrets to where they're not going to just absolutely dumpster it by just soaking everything out. And as you go back here, it is actually a little bit like flatter and there's less obstruction. So you can have your turrets all the way back here, actually be able to see all the way up there. Now, obviously all these bushes and stuff are in the way, but you can remove those fairly easily. And you should be able to have a pretty good like straight shot to there. I do still think that having the turrets up on the ceiling and then just covering the ground with like bear traps and stuff to like keep you from running, like fence foundations, is probably going to be the best bet. And then having the main actual wall somewhere in this room is probably going to be for the best, especially again with how the like range on generators is. You can have the generator push so far back now and not have to worry about that. Now, the rest of the cave seems more or less the same. That front entrance bit is the only part that I really noticed a giant change in. You can go to the left or the right here. I always go to the left, but you can go to the right if you want to. It's your life. You live it however you want to live it. And then you go all the way into the back, and this is normally where the second major wall would be. I don't remember this ever being in Church Cave in ASE, but it could have been. I'm not sure. I always just went straight through here when I got back here. I do, however, think that these giant crystals and stuff are a little bit more obtrusive than they were on ASE. I don't remember it quite being this much in the way. And then obviously you have the little area back here where you put your war room, all your important stuff, your transmitter, and you have the pit of death where, you know, you want to ideally not ever fall into and lose all your items. So Church Cave, I would say it probably got the hardest outside nerf, but the inside seems pretty solid, so I'd still say it's probably like top 3 spots on the map. Alright, and here we are at the last base location that I would consider to actually be like a strong base location. Now you guys may be surprised I'm not putting 1010 on here. It does not look nearly flat enough for me. If somebody in the future says that it's actually buildable, shows a buildable, like, you know, build for it and everything, more power to you. 1010's just a big, like, square of desert. It's not really worth showing on here. It's located at 1010 up here. So if you want to go ahead and take a look for that yourselves in single player, go for it. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at the last cave, which is being called Oasis Cave. It's located right underneath Red Obelisk. So if this turns out to be a very strong base location, this will probably be the best place to build because you have the obelisk right there, which allows you to, you know, have the ability to run boss fights and transfer and everything without having a transmitter. Now, that's less important in ASA as it was in ASE, because now you can run bosses through your transmitter, which is one of the dumbest things, in my opinion. But having the obelisk and everything right there is still, you know, helpful, I would assume, in some capacity. It does look like the outside is not actually 6x, so let's go ahead and check and see if it does become 6x anywhere. Still not. And let's check here. Alright, so this is 6x. But you could easily have a tower outside of here if that is where the 6x starts. 6x, by the way, if you guys aren't familiar, means it's doing 6 times the damage. It's called cave damage, 6x, whatever. And as you see, like, you know, sometimes the foundation explodes in one C4, or sometimes it explodes in several. That's dependent on whether or not it's cave damage. It does seem to not be cave damage on the exterior of this, so you could probably put a good amount of turrets outside of this cave. However, from what I've heard and what I'm seeing, it doesn't really look like you need to, considering this is a water cave, which is absolutely mind-boggling since Scorched Earth never had any sort of water whatsoever in ASE, and now you have an entire, like, underwater cave. So let's go ahead and explore this together and see what we're working with here. I read somewhere that this is the biggest cave in all of Ark, which I don't think that cannot be that can't be the case, right? But it does give me kind of Snow North vibes as far as the water part. It looks very much like we're going into the Snow North moon pool type situation, where you're going to need a lot of like water dinos if you want to try and get in here, and especially this swim up part, which could easily have turrets just all over the ceiling. You could have like a generator a little bit back. Even early on, you could just do like a normal generator on one of these little like out of the water parts, and then later you could have a, you know, couple of tech generators throughout. And then what are we getting into here? A nice big open area with, oh my god, they weren't lying, this is huge. Has tons of resources. But yeah, I mean, let's look around here. You get a little bit of Explorer Note action. Very lush, lots of like berries and stuff that you could farm. Oh, it even has a drop in here. Obviously, I'm in single player, so whatever's in there is going to be not accurate to official anyways. You've got a lot of trees, which is kind of cool, so you could actually farm your wood in here if you wanted to. Geez, it seems like it just goes on forever, man. We got another pool here. Doesn't look like it goes to anywhere, which is good, because that would be insane. Does not look like there is silica pearls in the water either. Okay, so we have another passage that goes back here. And now we're hitting some sort of crystal area that opens into what it looks like maybe the same area that I just came from. I can't really tell. I kind of hope so, though, because that's really huge if it isn't. Yeah, this has to be the same area. So just a giant area with a lot of space to build, but it doesn't look like there's an artifact in here. It doesn't look like there's any crazy amount of drops, and it doesn't look like there's anything extra beyond the first giant room. It just kind of wraps around in various different ways. Let me go ahead and double check really fast just before I put my foot in my mouth and somebody roast me in the comments, but it does seem like it is probably the strongest base location just because of the water part, but it's not like absurd for resources, and it doesn't have multiple like water parts or anything crazy like that. Getting through here is going to be a nightmare though, guys. So remember, you don't have stegos, so I'm not really sure how you're meant to do it. I guess you could have oxygen racers and maybe come through here with a racer. I'm not really sure that it would work though, to be entirely honest. So good luck on that if you're trying to raid here, but if you're trying to build here, this is what I would recommend for sure. I'm actually having trouble finding my way back out of this base, so... Oh, wow. Yeah, no, racers definitely won't fit down there. There's not enough space. So maybe you have to swim to here, throw the racer out, saddle it, and then build it, and then try to get up here. Oh my god. This is going to be unraidable until server transfers open. Wow, that is crazy. All right, well, that's going to do it for the video, boys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite base location was from this, and where you guys are going to be building on Scorched Earth. And if you guys would like me to make a video going over the best base locations on the island, let me know down in the comments as well. I know the map's been out for a while, but I'd like to give you guys my insight, show you guys the pros and cons like I did on here. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.